Hey guys, so now is the writing part, and I think it's the hardest part for most of the English learners. It doesn't matter uh, which countries.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, I'd say writing is difficult for a variety of reasons. English writing isn't the most difficult writing in the world. I think that award goes to Chinese and Japanese with all the characters. I think that is really tough. Definitely the hardest part about learning those languages, I think, is the writing. But English has some strange things that make it a little harder than some languages, namely spelling. The spelling in English is really weird. It comes from historical pronunciations that now we pronounce things differently, but before we did. For instance, the word night, like not the day, nighttime, right?
Yeah.
N-I-G-H-T. Why is it G-H? It used to be something like nicht. All the GHs used to be like a sound in English. So like I thought, in German that sounds like ich dachte. I thought. Pretty weird. Anyway, that's only for nerds. For everyone else, that's really annoying. So, yeah.
So from my perspective, I think writing is hard for Chinese speakers because like the logic is different.
Yeah.
Like when you are writing a Chinese article,
Okay.
and you're writing an English article, the logic is different.
The grammar, sort of, right?
Yeah, the grammar is different.
Yeah, I think that's true. If you have a different grammar, that means that you're going to have to formulate your sentences in a different way.
Yeah.
And you can't rely too heavily on your own language, on the way that you would express it in your language.
Like there's one thing I noticed a lot of Chinese students, they will make like the mistake. In Chinese we say 我喜欢狗. I like dogs.
Yeah.
Right? So they would like forget to pluralize.
Yeah. I like dog, yeah.
Yeah, I like dog.
That is one of the biggest grammar mistakes I think that Chinese speakers tend to make, is forgetting plurals. And especially not using the plural when you're talking about a whole category of things. Like, I like cats, I like dogs, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And in English, there's a lot of like sentence structures are weird to
Yeah.
Chinese students because like in Chinese everything is very directly, straightforward.
Okay, yeah.
Straightforward.
Like the word order and all that?
Yeah. So for instance, like in Chinese, we would say, 我的车被偷了.
Okay, my car was stolen?
Yeah, my car was stolen.
Yeah.
Right? 我的车被偷了. It's very like straightforward. Like, 我
Yeah, me, car,
被偷.
taken, yeah.
Taken. Yeah. And like in English, the verb, like the adverb changed.
Yeah.
Stolen,
Okay.
like the
Yeah,
adverb.
it's a verb, yeah.
It's a verb.
Yeah,
My car was stolen.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It becomes, yeah. I think that's a confusing part of the grammar. I think the most confusing part of English grammar for Chinese native speakers is the verb stuff.
Yeah.
The way that verbs change in different situations. I think it's easier for English speakers to learn Chinese grammar in that aspect, because the verbs in Chinese are pretty easy.
Yeah.
Like, 我去, right? Like I go, but it's also 他去. You know what I mean? Like everything is just one
Like
verb.
in Chinese, it doesn't matter about the time difference.
Yeah,
Like time difference is a huge problem.
yeah, absolutely. That's a major problem I see when I'm correcting the papers of Chinese learners. I do that sometimes for my job. I correct people's papers. That's another big one. Time, verb tense, and verb time is very difficult when you're not used to thinking about it as much. Of course, Chinese does communicate when things happen. Like you have time,
Yeah.
but it just is communicated in a different way. With like la and like some other things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's hard to get used to.
So okay, grammar. Like let's overlook the grammar first.
Okay.
what else do you think
about writing.
about writing? Yeah.
So I think you've got, with writing, I would break it into grammar, spelling, and punctuation. I think the special part of writing that's different is obviously spelling and punctuation. I think spelling, I don't have any tips. I'll be honest. My only tip would be read a lot, and you just get used to the way that things are spelled. There's not very much logic to the spelling in English. Sometimes people ask me, okay, if I see a word spelled this way, how do I pronounce it? Or is there any rules? There's some little things that you can learn, but in general, basically you're just memorizing. You're just basically remembering, you learn them and then you recognize them later. Like they're spelled in strange ways. And one secret is that native English speakers can't spell everything right. And a lot of the time spell things wrong. Even common words are frequently misspelled in English because it's really confusing, even for us. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. If you can read, if you spell things wrong, like, so what? You've got autocorrect.
Yeah, just like with spelling, just memorize.
Yeah.
There's no like shortcuts.
No, there's unfortunately no shortcuts.
And like conjugation.
Conjugation, yeah, the grammar and all that. You mean punctuation? Yeah.
Yeah, punctuation.
Punctuation. Okay, punctuation. Again, it's pretty much memorization, but no. Okay, there are rules. There are rules for punctuation. It's different. It's not like spelling. Spelling in English is just random. It's historical, so it has to do with the way things used to be pronounced, right? It's a little bit phonetic. I mean, a little bit it's written the way it sounds, but then it's also just kind of not phonetic, right? So, okay, with punctuation, I think the main mistake that I see Chinese speakers make is with commas. I don't know why, because I actually don't know how to use commas very well in Chinese writing, so I don't know. They're used differently, right?
In Chinese, like we don't use comma that often.
Okay.
Like in English.
Yes, that I've definitely noticed that.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times, well, I mean, historically, Chinese was written with no punctuation, right? Like before, it was just like, it's all there. You have to figure it out.
Yeah.
But now you guys have a little bit. You've borrowed like periods and commas, but not used the same way.
Not used the same way.
Yeah, I think commas are very important in English writing, and they're very difficult. Oh, well, I won't say that they're difficult. Like they're not impossible, but English speakers have trouble with commas as well. But they can be very important for like meaning, especially one mistake I've noticed. Okay, there's basically two kinds of mistakes with the commas. One is putting in way too many commas or putting them in where they don't belong. Okay. I've seen some people that think, okay, I've got to put in some commas. I'll just put them here, here, here. I don't, and sometimes it's in the middle of a thought. I was going to the store. I was comma going to. That'd be weird. Think of a comma like a pause, right? If you wouldn't just randomly pause there for no reason, there won't be a comma.
Interesting, because in Chinese speaking, I think speaking influences your writing.
Yeah.
Like speaking, writing.
True.
So some people, that's why they write in like a very verbal way.
Yeah.
Not academic in writing. So they use a lot of like slang, fragments, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And weird like stuff. I don't know how to do that. Weird stuff.
Yeah. No,
so
yeah,
if you can speak well, your writing won't be too bad.
Yeah, that's true. If you can speak at a... The only difference is writing is in a way... Speaking is a little bit more complex in a way. I think speaking has tone, tone of voice, it has a... Punctuation is supposed to stand in for non-verbal communication when we're talking.
Yeah.
Right? Because we don't have any information about the sound, about the tone of voice, so we put these punctuation marks in so we can tell. Because in English, if I say a sentence, sorry, I'm getting confused here, but basically, you can hear punctuation in a way in speaking. We punctuate with our hands, with our voices, and all that.
In Chinese, like the punctuation, like the comma, we don't. When you are writing an article, like you comma where you feel like to comma.
Yeah.
We don't
Okay,
have like a
interesting.
rules, like specific rules to put a comma.
You know, English speakers, when they make mistakes with commas, usually they do the same thing.
Yeah.
Is that basically they know that a comma is like a pause.
Yeah.
So they think, okay, if I was going to pause in speech, maybe I'll pause
That's
here.
exactly like Chinese students do.
Yeah, same thing. But the problem is that commas in English follow certain rules. So it is a pause, but then again, it's a rule. Like it's a way you have to pause in certain places.
Yeah.
Some are optional, but usually they're required. There's I read an article about like 8 different places where you need commas. I don't think we need to go over all the rules.
Yeah.
You can look them up. Here's what I would say. My one tip about that would be you don't necessarily need to try to memorize the rules. You can look at the rules if you want, if you're confused. But the real way that you're going to learn how to use commas is by reading a lot of English that is written in a formal way. Stuff like BBC News, stuff like that. And paying attention to where these commas and other punctuation marks happen, and then copying them.
And how to avoid writing too verbal.
Okay, too like informally kind of?
Yeah.
Too much like you speak?
Yeah, like too much like you speak. Too informal.
Okay, so this is a tough one because you're really talking about 2 different parts of language. In any language, generally there's a written part of the language and there's a spoken part, and they use different words a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And so that takes experience. I think it's okay to write in an informal style when you're learning a language. I think that really what I would say is it's worse to be too complicated and mess up so people can't understand you than it is to be very simple and direct. I would recommend that if you're not comfortable with some kind of advanced structure, maybe just try something simpler. You don't always have to be fancy. I think that sometimes people, when they're learning, they want to prove that they know certain words or they know certain phrases. People do that. English speakers do that too. If I'm writing an exam for college, sometimes you try to use really fancy words.
Yeah.
But for communication, and remember, the goal is not to prove that you know words. The goal is communication. And even on IELTS and tests like that, your number one goal is to communicate something clearly, right? So that's what's most important. If it's going to be a simple way, that's better than a confusing way.
I think we can make an example about writing like sentence and like speaking sentence. So for instance, like Walmart is considered a shitty company.
Yeah.
To Americans.
Okay. By Americans, probably.
By Americans. Yeah. And this sentence would only like appear in articles. Like in reality, like you won't say it. Like who will say it? Like,
well, they won't say shitty, but like they'll say it was considered
immoral.
Immoral company.
Immoral company. Like Walmart is considered an immoral company by Americans.
Yeah.
And this sentence will only appear in reading article. Like in real life, no one will say that. I just walk to somebody and ask like, what do you think of Walmart? About Walmart?
Walmart is considered
nobody will say that. And that's the writing like kind of style. That's the writing style of English. And like in conversational English, we will say like, I think Walmart is shitty.
Yeah, exactly. I fucking hate Walmart. Exactly. Yeah. No, yeah, that's true. I think that in sometimes people will bring the written language into speaking. Like if you're talking to an educated person and you start talking about something really high level or something, maybe they'll start quoting, they'll start using that kind of language. But normally, the difference is that in spoken language, you don't have time to organize your thoughts in a very beautiful way.
Yes.
We have a word that we borrow from Latin we call ad hoc, which means just like at the moment you do it. You just you throw it together. It's spontaneous. So there's a very big difference between spontaneous thought and written thought, where you're trying to make it seem as beautiful as possible, as streamlined.
Yes.
You don't want to, for instance, when we're speaking, I often interrupt myself. I repeat things on accident. I say things like, you know what I mean. Like filler words. stuff like that.
Like you see what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
you get where I'm going.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Different things like that. And I'm also using body language and tone to communicate things that you have to communicate differently in writing. If you notice, like a lot of times when people send you a text message with something where you might think it could be rude, right? Like if someone says like, hey, do you want me to get you some food or something? And you just type, I'm fine. And no, just I'm fine, period.
Yeah.
Right? Why is that? That's considered rude. And the reason is because if you don't add like a smiley face or some extra information, it seems too abrupt. It's too short. In speaking, you could say that same thing and you wouldn't have to add extra information or something like that. You'd just be like, oh, I'm fine.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm good.
And with tone of voice, they know that you're not being like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But I think that's a major difference.
And word usage
Yeah.
in writing. What do you think?
Word usage. What do we mean by that?
Word usage, like like in speaking, you won't say in conclusion,
Right.
the kind of stuff. In some,
Yeah.
right, the kind of stuff. All in all, the kind.
Correct. Yeah. A lot of transition words.
Yeah.
Because a lot of, there's something that we call superstructure, which is like, it doesn't matter, but basically like the way that we organize sentences, right? A lot of the time in spoken language, we use our hands, we use our voices to show the relationship
Yeah.
or how we feel about something like that. And I think it's the same thing with word users. Like you're talking about these transitional words, like in conclusion, like to sum it all up. You're explaining more than you would really have to explain speaking in an informal situation. Like instead of saying like to sum it all up, I'd say, so yeah, it sucks. You know, like
So yeah.
yeah, so yeah.
Anyway.
Anyway.
It like blah blah blah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, what's your advice to writing to Chinese students about writing?
Number one advice is read a lot. And I like to read out loud. I think that that's a good way to stay focused and then also to practice pronouncing the words as you read.
And do you suggest them to break down the structure of the article?
You know, I would say this. I'm usually against trying too hard to like analyze stuff, like grammar, stuff like that. I think that you have a language brain, right? You have a brain that works with language. And like when we're speaking now, we're not really thinking, we're not planning every word, right?
Yeah.
It just happens.
Just have it.
Because you have a part of your brain that knows how to do it. So what I think you need to do is get a lot of input. Input is the stuff you read, the stuff you listen to. A lot of that and understand it. So read a lot. And then naturally, those patterns, those ways of speaking will become part of your vocabulary when you go to express yourself.
Mm-hmm. So don't overanalyze.
Yeah, don't worry, don't overanalyze it too much. Yeah, that would be a major tip. Another one would be, don't try to do too much. I think a lot of times people, when they're writing in some kind of English test, something like that, they shoot too far. You know, they're trying too hard to use kind of advanced structures and sometimes they mess it up.
They use the structure and words they cannot control it.
Exactly. Like they don't have the control of it yet.
Yeah.
But they're just trying to like put it in there. And then it just makes it really confusing. And then you're like, okay. It would have been better if they just said it in the most direct way because then it's understandable and correct.
Like they cannot pull it off, you know?
No.
It's very hard.
Right, exactly.
And do you suggest that to memorize some difficult words for writing?
Memorize like, yeah, okay, so I remember when you were studying for IELTS, I think I talked to you, you were saying you were using some kind of transition words.
Yeah.
Like things to organize your thoughts.
Yeah.
You can if you want. Yeah, you can practice. That can be helpful is to remember those words that help organize thinking. That could be helpful. Those are usually very important words in any language, is the words that are for, you know what I mean, grammar, like nonetheless, however, like those things are important. Memorize, I wouldn't make a list of them and try to memorize them. I would try to like learn them in context. So what I like to do is I always tell my students, learn things in context. Like read an article on BBC and you'll find a lot of those words like however, this kind of thing. And it'll be more interesting. So your brain will like remember it better.
How about like if the students, do you think they need to like remember some difficult words like concession instead of snakes?
Okay.
Yeah.
Concessions instead of stuff. I mean, you can. Like if you come across some word that you just really want to be part of your vocabulary, if you want to repeat it to yourself or something like that, go ahead. But what I would do is just keep reading and listening to the kind of content where that word would show up. Like if I want to learn vocabulary about the law, something like that, I watch a show about lawyers. I read articles about crime and trials and stuff like that. And if the word is important, it'll appear again and again and again. You know what I mean? And that's, I think, the best way. That's what I would say.
Okay. So first one is read a lot.
Read a lot. Second one is don't try to do too much.
Yeah.
Just be simple. I mean,
Don't overanalyze.
Yeah. And then 3. What were we saying?
The third one is
Maybe don't
memorize.
overanalyze. Yeah.
Memorize the words.
Or kind of learn them in context.
Yeah, learn them.
Like don't try to like.
It's kind of funny. Like your brain only memorize the word if you use it.
Yeah. Right. If it's useful, your brain remembers it. So I think number 3 would probably be. You don't need to sit down and memorize all the grammar rules. You don't need to sit down and try and memorize a list of, where to use a comma, something like that. Learn about it by understanding, by seeing a lot of that content and just paying attention. You don't need to write down the rules or something. I mean, you can if you want to. If that helps you a lot, do it. But it doesn't help me. That's not what I do.
Me too. Yeah. So, yes. Trevor.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, English teacher.
Thank you.
EF with certification.
In conclusion, yeah.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
And nice advice. So
Thank you.
yeah, thank you guys.